To our technical team, I think that we are ready to start now. I greet you again, colleagues, those that are here with us at Albert Wessel Auditorium, University of Free State, Bloemfontein campus. I greet you all, colleagues. I see that all our keynote speakers are here now, so we are ready to start. A warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Professor Khumalo, all the way from Northwest University. Our Dean of Faculty of Humanities, Professor Masocha. A warm welcome and thank you for coming. I see colleagues from the faculties, colleagues from the CTL, I greet you. I see colleagues from our unit of lexicography. Thank you very much, colleagues, for coming. I see colleagues from library services. We are really grateful for your presence today, and all colleagues from other departments and faculties. We are streaming live from the University of Free State. I know that we have other colleagues at our different faculties, different campuses. Corpus campus, there are colleagues joining us live there. We also from the South campus. I've been told that we also have colleagues from other institutions joining us via YouTube. I greet you all, colleagues. The ones that I've seen, colleagues from the University of Free State, colleagues from the University of Wits. I see colleagues from the University of Johannesburg. I see colleagues from the University of Limpopo. I greet you all, colleagues. We are ready to start our program. Our DVC academic, Dr. Engela van Staden, could not be with us today due to another urgent commitment, but she sent a warm welcome to all of you. We will start our program now. My name is Nomalungelo Ngubane. I'm the director of the Academy for Multilingualism. I'll be directing the program today. We do not have programs here at the auditorium, but colleagues, if you can go to online, we do have our online programs. I will call our first speaker, Dr. Malete, the HOD of African Languages, University of Free State, to give us a welcome, a background, and the purpose of our language policy seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Colleagues, for this opportunity here. My duty is a simple one of just introducing to you the purpose of this seminar today, but also to outline the purpose of the language policy in general. And that is why I thought it would be important to give a background information about the development of African languages. Let me come to this introduction before I outline the purposes there. We all know, ladies and gentlemen, that the African languages have been alienated for quite some time, and as a result of that alienation, we find that the African communities were non-present in their spaces of history, culture, science, and knowledge. And as a result, with the new dispensation, then it was important for us to have, and there was also, with the new political dispensation, we also have various language policies for higher education that have been developed. However, there are a number of language and policy aspects that also alluded to the fact that the development of African languages still remain a challenge even today. While most of the public universities have language policies, the implementation thereof remains a challenge. So, how did this marginalization of African languages, together with the African people in general, occurred? For me, this was the management and control of knowledge, and this is just a public knowledge that there was this international law and the political order of knowledge based on the European epistemic and aesthetic principles, which in turn disqualified non-European knowledge and non-European aesthetic standards and marginalized non-European languages and cultures. And as a result, this meant that the speakers of these languages and the richness of their culture and worldviews were removed from historically existing methodologies. And this is what the universities and our present government would like, at least to address that. And if you look at the practical part of it, I just want to highlight one thing here, that the general overview shows that universities teach African languages in an asocial manner, and that we all concentrate on the structural study of languages, and we still exclude the culture that is surrounding these languages. And as a result, and this occurs in South Africa, all over the world, where there are people who are studying these African languages who can't even speak those languages, but who are making a lot of money through the use of these languages. And that knowledge that is being cultivated is not accessible to the people that it is concerned about. So maybe it is also necessary for us, when we look at the language policies, we also look at this aspect that the language policy has to address as well. Now, if you look at the 2002 language policy, we are saying there are a number of steps, also probably mechanisms that has to be put in place so that we can develop these African languages. And one of them, it is the language policies. I know that the Department of Higher Education came up with the 2002 language policy, and it also addressed the promotion of multilingualism, the development of African languages. But if you look at the 2002 language policy, it elaborated much on Afrikaans and to alleviate the concerns at that time. And this we can find it on paragraph number 10. And if you look at the 2017 language policy draft, Afrikaans was also included into the language policy framework, which of course in my view, it is also an accommodating principle that should be considered, and that the university policies should also take into consideration that fact as well. But if you look at the 2017 language policy draft, it also alluded to the three challenges there. It also recognized that there was the language barrier to many of the students. There's a need for the multilingual environment or development, but also that the 2002 policy is, in fact, that the African languages continue to be underdeveloped and undervalued. This is what it was highlighted in the 2017 policy framework draft. Now, in this background information, highlights concerning raised by the ministerial report, which it promises to address, that there is a lack of support for the African language department and lack of partnership between the universities. Now, if we are now talking about the decolonization period, we should then be addressing the plight of African languages, which have been carefully and systematically alienated and disregarded as languages of science and epistemology. Now, the new language policy framework is highlighting this need and imperative by the inclusion of these two values that I consider very important for me, and that is the need for higher education to value all indigenous languages as sources of knowledge capable of informing a learning of the different disciplines in higher education. Most importantly, the value of collaborative partnership to promote multilingualism. Now, based on these two values, the University of the Free State, the language policy of the university, mandated a task team to review the 2016 language policy to address these two important values of the language policy framework. And then if you look at the structure of the language policy framework, the language policy of the University of the Free State, it also encompasses these two, the policy statement that I only highlighted the 2 year. English became the primary medium of instruction, and then the other languages also applied only a tutorial system. Then we had to look at that and how can we enhance the use of those two, or these other, I don't want to say secondary languages to English, but looking at Afrikaans, Sesotho, and isiZulu, how can then the language policy of the university address the anomalies that we get in these languages? Now, if you look at the highlights, the sections of the language policy of the University of the Free State that we revised as the tax team, these are the things that we highlighted there. The background information, the purpose, and definition of abbreviation, the principles policy statement. If you look at the policy statement, I think it has got about more than 11 items that it addresses, and the implementation plan, monitoring, evaluation. But there were concerns that were raised by Senate, and one of them is that, was it necessary really to review this policy? Can you correct something that is not constituting problems? But according to the policy, every 5 years, the language policy has to be reviewed, and that is the reason that the tax team was mandated to do that. But also, one of the concerns was that there seems to be no clarity between the implementation plan and the policy statement, and that there were some of the phrases in the policy statement that needs to be revised. And also probably to take into consideration whether those court rulings that were made before the 2016 was approved, can we have them been considered before we could do or revise the University of the Free State language policy? Now, I would summarize by saying the purpose of this seminar this morning, ladies and gentlemen, it is to look at those concerns that were raised by the Senate, and also to look at the language policy of the University of the Free State, whether are we winning in trying to address all those anomalies that I have highlighted with regard to the development of African languages. This is a very serious concern that each and every university should consider. Now, one of the most important things that the policy that can do, and that I think all these universities are not willing to do, it is to declare the African languages as one of the official languages. If it is not an official or declared an unofficial language, then I don't see a way forward of putting this African, or the languages themselves into a platform where they can have the status to be developed, or not only just to be developed, but to be used. It can be a language of instruction, it can be a tutorial language, but is it official? That is a question that we need to address. With these few words, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that the deliberations that are going to take place today will help us to review and revise the language policy of the university. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malete. That is the head of Department of African Languages, University of Free State. He's based in Bloemfontein campus. Thank you very much, Doc, for that welcome and background and purpose of the seminar. I do agree that as the University of Free State, we do not want to be left behind in the transformation that is happening across South Africa, especially with regards to the implementation of the language policy framework for higher education and the development of African languages. We need to adapt, we need to transform, and we need to adopt the imperatives of the language policy. Thank you very much, sir. Colleagues who are moving forward, I need to acknowledge, I've been receiving messages that the University of South Africa is joining us via YouTube as well. And I would like to acknowledge our Vice Rector, Corpus Campus, Professor Sithole. Thank you very much for joining us as well. Colleagues who are moving along with our program, I would like to call on stage Professor Van Niekerk, to introduce our keynote speaker. She is the Department of Afrikaans, French and Dutch. We welcome you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Allow me just to take one step back to introduce our speaker today and to actually motivate why we have invited him. During 2022, the task team, or the language committee, has appointed a task team to revise the current language policy. And we have made good progress, but it turned out that our policy was more of a plan than a policy. And we needed to revise that. So we had to make a new plan. And our new plan, like all good plans, have a name. And our plan for today to revise that issue of a policy that's not a plan is called Professor Langa Khumalo. And we have good hope and high hopes that this plan will pay off. No pressure, Prof. And I based that on 5 things from his CV. It's a very lengthy and impressive CV, but I will try to keep it short. The first thing is that he is the Executive Director of the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources, SADiLaR. Secondly, he is also the former Director of the Language Planning and Development Office of the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He also has all the right academic credentials. He has a PhD in Linguistics from the University of Oslo, Norway. He has an MPhil in Linguistics from the University of Cambridge in the UK. He is the current president of AfriLex, the South African Association for Lexicography. And I think most importantly, he was one of the members of the task team appointed by the DHET to revise the current national language policy framework. And whatever we decide here today and plan in the future is linked to that policy framework. So we can really learn from his experience in that regard. Professor, we find it very strange that somebody can have a nickname or a middle name like language policy, but we are very glad that you are here and that you will help us to move forward with our language policy. Thank you.
She said no pressure, so I won't have that pressure. I want to say all protocol observed, just so that I don't leave anyone out. But I will acknowledge the Dean of the Humanities, Professor Masocha, who is also, if some of you don't know, the chair of the steering committee that governs and steers the mandate of the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources, SADiLaR for short. I didn't see my slides up there, but I can actually proceed and talk. I think it would be helpful, though, for people to see them. And I apologize because I didn't come and familiarize myself with the podium before my talk. I am filling in very big shoes because I was requested to come and speak in place of Professor Kwesi Kwapra, whom I have known since 2001. I can't fill in his shoes clearly, and I won't even attempt. but what I have attempted is to formulate my talk around knowledge and the vehicle through which we disseminate that knowledge is language, and then force us to think about the future, which is already upon us through the fourth industrial revolution. I thought a lot about this in the small time that I was requested to come and quickly fill in the shoes of Professor Kwesi Pra. But I found myself thinking more about the cold than about my talk. And I am freezing. I hope that the talk is going to warm me up. This place is freezing, but I was warned that it is indeed freezing. I brought my laptop here so that I can navigate the slides better. So what I'm going to try and do before zeroing in on language policy and the things that we are going to need to look at when we are talking about language policy and implementation plans. And I think beyond this talk, I am very available to look at the language policy after this seminar so that we can together try and move forward the current version of the UFS language policy. But in this talk, I hope I will invoke some thinking towards actually going back to say, let us really look at this policy. Is it doing the things that this talk is going to try and evoke? I will look at a couple of definitions on knowledge, because knowledge is very important. We pursue knowledge the moment we start speaking. We pursue knowledge the moment we start speaking. And it is a travesty that the language that you start speaking is not, for most learners, the language with which to access knowledge and be competent in the areas that we choose in that particular language. It's a serious travesty. But we will see what the philosophers say about language and how language and about knowledge and how language and knowledge are closely intertwined, and how, therefore, we need to formulate our policies so that these languages are actually reconnected to the pursuit of knowledge, something that we do as soon as we start speaking that first word in our mother tongue. And then I'll take back the discussion to the colonial times, where I will try and look at how African languages were de-intellectualized. We moved out of the learning spaces, and with that disconnection, a lot of innovation was taken away from the academy. And knowledge economy today is poorer without the input of the philosophy that belies or that is encapsulated in the languages that actually frame that thinking, that epistemology. And then, of course, see how we can re-intellectualize African languages so that, again, we can begin to contribute meaningfully to the knowledge economy as part of the very important knowledge centers in pursuit of what I've already said is knowledge. And then, of course, the new threat, because we are faced with a new threat in the development of all languages, but more so the less resourced languages. And I'll talk about what we mean by resourcedness. And yeah, then conclude. And hopefully the conclusion is going to be important. When you're talking about language, and I always say this wherever I speak about language, we just have to calm down. Because when you're talking about language, you're talking about the people themselves. When you're talking about language, you're talking about the people that speak that particular language. So we really need to be calm when we're talking about matters of language, because you can actually touch up a country if you speak recklessly about a people's language. And what best to evoke the statesman himself when he said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And that is a very pregnant statement, and it means a lot of things. But most importantly, it means that language is at the heart of our human existence. It is that which makes us human. In my language, isiNdebele, when a child speaks the first word in the language, when a child begins to say baba or mama or mina or whatever word they say, that first word, the elders exclaim, "Sekungumuntu." It is now a human being. Because it speaks, it is now a human being. So language humanizes us. And with that is the first instrument with which we start pursuing our immediate paraphernalia. We start wanting to know who this is, mama, who that is, baba, who that is, a dog, who that is, a heart, a home. We start understanding the world around us because we have the ability to speak. So language humanizes us. It organizes and expresses our thoughts, and it spurs our innovation. Let's try and link up language and what we understand as knowledge, as education. According to Aristotle, and I evoke the very early philosophers for a very good reason, education is the process of training man to fulfill his aim by exercising all the faculties to the fullest extent as a member of society. And John Dewey, the American, says education is all one with growing. It has no end beyond itself. So when you start pursuing knowledge, you are growing. Your faculties are growing. And as you develop your linguistic repertoire, your lexicon, as it grows, therein you get the faculties that actually make sense of the world, of knowledge. And according to Mchombo, education viewed in simple terms is citizenship training. That's what we know. That when you are taking a child through, if it's a man, young man, a full man, you are training that person. It's citizenship training. They are learning everything they need to know, and it didn't have institutions. That's why the man himself, when he's old enough, he is an institution himself. And apologies, it's the influence of the philosophers. When I say men, I really don't mean men, M-A-N. I mean humanity. I am so sorry about that. Please fault Aristotle. I would have said men and women because I'm that sensitive. But it is citizenship training. The man, as a full-grown man, is an institution in and of himself because he has put together a dictionary, the first monolingual dictionary of isiNdebele. We went to the rural areas to actually interview old men. And I wanted to know about cattle. And he said, what is it that you want to know? The philosophy behind cattle, the cow itself, or the anatomy of the cattle? And I thought, okay, maybe I'm in a chatbot here. You know, his neural networks are actually on fire. He is trying to access like the whole network of knowledge that he has learned through his life. And then he said, bring a cow, kill it. I'll teach you about a cow. I thought he was joking. I don't have that kind of research money to go and buy a cow to kill for your satisfaction. And at first I thought he wanted meat. But he wanted to teach me about every single part, internal and external, of a cow, including the diseases that it had, the full anatomy, and the diseases. So he was a veterinary scientist on the one hand, a cultural expert on the other, a philosopher, That was citizenship training. That's what Nchombo, if you read that article, that's what he says about education before colonial institutions. That took away and sectorized the schooling system, the learning processes, by saying, no, you're going to start kindergarten there, you're going to start your primary there, you're going to do your tertiary there. We started chunking the whole process that we were actually familiar with through the imperial process. So, to Mchombo, and this is again in Chombo's 2017 article, transmission of knowledge and culture is facilitated by the use of language. Education involved in citizenship training, the cultivation of moral values, training the young in practical skills, socializing them in the cultural practices and religious beliefs, intellectual development, and so on, has traditionally been conducted through the vehicle of language, primarily through its oral medium, making the oral tradition the main vehicle of education in many societies. And now you can begin to visualize the violence that took place when the imperial system landed on our shores. Because in one fell swoop, they cut out our tongues. They told us, you can't bring your language to the school system, because the official language in that school is English, a language that was alien to all of them. So our tongues were cut. Even when we were praising their Christ, they gave us English hymns. So our tongues were totally taken out of our mouths. We stopped from connecting the conceptual development processes with the process of verbalizing and innovating through our language, through our articulation, our ideas. So you will see how that conceptually and linguistically is a violation of the speakers of those languages, as I make reference to other scholars. So the marginalization of African languages with regard to their use in education system dominated literacy and the graphitization of languages. So the value was attached to a language that was documented, language that had an orthography, language that could reduce thought processes through writing. And many got reduced to written forms only after coming in contact with alien civilizations. When I'm saying alien, I'm not saying they are wrong, but they were foreign to the people that they were getting contact with. So Western colonialism brought in Christian military proselytization, and the literacy and the power relations of colonialism that accompanied the introduction of formal education very quickly relegated oral tradition to a status of inferior, or worse still, non-existent knowledge. So it was as if we did not exist. It was as if we did not know anything before the orthography of our languages. And we started learning through the new languages that were imposed, that we came into contact with. So you see the nexus between education and language, and how right now, as universities, we are in a unique position to reconnect that link to the body of our students that have been actually learning in a second, third, or even a fourth language. And if we want to really address the bane of higher education, the high attrition rates, we really need to actually look into these language policies, because they will unlock certain affordances that currently our students don't have. And the biggest affordance is your mother tongue, and the use of your mother tongue in learning and developing concepts in your mother tongue. That is the only way that our students in future can start innovating. Otherwise, right now, we are learning through just rote memorization. That's how we are learning, rote memorization. I always ask my students at masters, no, I'm not going to talk about morphosyntax, the processes in morphosyntactic theory, because you learned that in your undergraduate. Sorry, sir, we don't remember a thing. That's the disjuncture that the language presents in our learning system, in our learning processes. So I want to actually introduce something that we are actually talking about when we are saying, let us develop these languages. We are saying we are intellectualizing them. But I want to actually problematize that intellectualization process because it actually means, it presupposes that our African languages did not have the power, the intellectual power. And I want to demonstrate in the next couple of slides that actually we are re-intellectualizing African languages. We are not intellectualizing them. And this is what the famous Havranek, who actually started this idea of intellectualization, he defines intellectualization of a language as its adaptation to the goals of making possible precise and rigorous, if necessary, abstract statements capable of expressing the continuity and the complexity of thought. And you can tell, the thinking and the wording is actually interlinked. That's how you develop as a human being. That's why you start thinking in an abstract, in a philosophical way, because that capacity is there in your language. It is the reinforcement of the intellectual side of the speech. This intellectualization culminates in the scientific or theoretical speech, determined by the attempt to be as precise in expression as possible, to make statements which reflect the rigor of objective scientific thinking, in which the terms approximate concepts and the sentences approximate logical expression. That's what we mean when we say we want to intellectualize African languages. But when you read it very, very closely, you begin to think, but our ancestors actually had this capacity. So what happened? What happened? And I want to show you that there is no language that is innately intellectual. It acquires that through its interface with complex science. And I want to evoke Samuel Jensen, an English writer of the 18th century. He had to say about the English language, but no longer talking about African languages here, about the English language. He says, when I took the first survey of my undertaking, I found our speech copious without order and energetic without rules. Whenever I turned my view, there was perplexity to be disentangled and confusions to be regulated. Choice was to be made out of boundless variety without any established principle of selection. Adulterations were to be detected without the suffrages of any writers of classical reputation or acknowledged authority. This is what he says in the 18th century about English language, and I'm quoting one of their luminaries in the development of English, David Crystal, in 2005. So Johnson's impressions clearly suggest that English could not be used to make precise, rigorous, abstract statements to express complex thought in a logical way as defined by Havranek for an intellectualized language. If we compare this to isiXhosa, in the impression of one of the foremost 19th century isiXhosa lexicographers, Appleyard, one would argue that isiXhosa bore some vital qualities of an intellectualized language, even then, in the 19th century. This is what Appleyard said of isiXhosa. How came these people or their ancestors, centuries ago, to express them in this way and to adopt this system of alliteration? No one can tell. But whatever their language is, and whatever may have been its origin, the isiXhosa speakers themselves are not an intellectually, this is the original emphasis, intellectually childish race. In all grammatical variations of the form, the language is eminently distinguished by system and regularity, It is correctly spoken by all classes of the community, which is not the case, perhaps, with any of our European tongues. As a very general, if not invariable rule, an isiXhosa speaker will never be heard using an ungrammatical expression. I'm not the one who's saying this. It's not Shara who said this. It's not one of the famous Africans who said this. It's Epeliat himself. Of our African languages, before civilization landed in our shores. So I want to argue, therefore, and introduce this term de-intellectualization. In the pre-colonial context, with a stable African epistemological order, African languages served its speakers optimally in all their intellectual activities, as I showed you with that anecdote. They served that well. That was complete citizenship training. We had all the affordances that we required. Something the English language could not do during Johnson's time in England. English was a disorderly language in terms of Johnson in comparison to Greek and Latin, if you read further in that article. The advent of colonialism and the new imperial order, which introduced a new intellectual order, in fact, de-intellectualized African languages by proscribing them into the academy. That disconnect, the fact that we were, I think I'm one of the many generation here who actually were told, you are not supposed to bring your language in class. And we had prefects who wrote our names for punishment if we spoke in any other language other than English during school time. We suffered that disjuncture. We suffered the process of de-intellectualization. African languages were proscribed in schools and the academy, themselves the new training spaces. Remember, the citizenship training started when you started saying those first words. You started the pursuit of language. Now here is a system that says, we're cutting that. We are going to foist knowledge in a language that you are going to spend the entire life trying to master. English and other foreign languages. So now, when we're moving towards re-intellectualization, which is this process going forward, this involves rejecting the assumption that African languages are inherently shallow and therefore inadequate. Providing enablers that will ensure the use of African languages in all spheres of life, as they were. This means providing language resources that will enable the use of African languages in teaching and learning, in research, in administration, as articulated in the new language policy framework for higher education institutions. I see that in the policy that you made reference to, and I was privy to the documents that were sent to me on Friday, is that there is no declaration. And by the way, if you don't declare in a policy, you can't follow through. There's no declaration of what the policy intends to do. So like the country declared 11 official languages. So that's what we're following, because there's a declaration, there's a constitutional provision that says all these languages are official languages of the country, and we must work to achieve parity of esteem between them. So that means those that are way up, you have to bring those ones that are way down so that you achieve that parity. And as I always say when we're talking about language, we're not even saying we're going to say anything about those that we had advantage. No, because they are languages, they are mother tongue speakers in our communities. So they have the same right as the right that we want to raise for these other 9 indigenous languages. So you are not changing the furniture, as I always say. You're moving it around. You're not saying, I don't want that chair, throw it out. No, the furniture remains the same. You're just moving it around so that when we are sitting around, we are sitting all equally. And we feel we are equally. And we are all exercised equally. So when we are actually saying this intellectualized African languages, you are actually raising their profile, their usages, and the the affordability, the lexical flexibility that is required for an intellectualized language, so that it can speak with that logic, it can speak with that proficiency, it can speak with that close approximation of the conceptual with the articulation. So when we listen to them, we hear them speaking well, as Eplihad said of isiXhosa in the 19th century. So when we are re-intellectualizing African languages, we want to raise them in such a way that they can actually function in all spheres of life. The policy declares that. The policy says, and I will quote it in a minute, I'll come to the policy because I'm getting to that, and I don't see that in your own language policy. You are arrogating a structure in your policy. You are saying there's a primary language, and I hate that word. To be frank, I want to declare that. Primary language, and then there are other languages. How dare? Okay, sorry. I take that back. But you can't afford to say there are primary and other languages. That structure is not supposed to be there. If you have 4 of them, they are all 4 official languages of UFS. UKZN did that. It just said English and this is Zulu are official languages. And we are going to work hard to bring parity between the 2 languages. And we set out to do that. Here, if you have 4, just declare that. And then you set out to do that. And you will see that it's achievable because you have a goal. But if you say, yeah, we have English already secured, and then we will see about how these others are going to be accommodated. No. They have mother tongue speakers. Afrikaans is a community of mother tongue speakers. isiXhosa has a community of isiZulu, Sesotho. What are you saying about those people? Are you saying they're second-class citizens to English? And if you are coming to the SALT conference, I am speaking about English hegemony and how to disrupt that hegemony in South Africa in the first instance and globally. Because it is not helping us in the pursuit of knowledge to have certain knowledge centers outside the global knowledge economy. The world is poorer because we don't know what an Afrikaans-speaking neuroscientist or neurosurgeon is thinking, what his breakthrough is. Because we have prescribed that language. We say, no, it's not part of the languages that we want as global languages. You're doing the same for isiZulu. And I always give this case. There is a lady, a midwife in KZN, who, since she started her trade, she never had, I don't remember the statistics now. I always had this off the cuff. See, the travesty of staying in Northwest. But they were fighting huge child deaths in a big modern hospital, and yet this midwife, using IKS, not even a single child. Because we are missing something. We are poorer without the knowledge of that scientist, that midwife, that gynecologist who is sitting with her natural knowledge. And we are assuming that our doctors have everything and that our children are dying in hospitals. I'm sorry to digress. But I come back to the official languages in South Africa. There are 11, soon to be 12. And I really applaud your commitment to South African Sign Language. It's already here, so we must be planning for that language because it's our 12th language. The Constitution says we must achieve parity of esteem between all of them, which means there's no primary, there's no others. Okay? So that distinction must go, really. And unfortunately, as you actually restate, I don't know how many times you restate in your policy, English remains the only, and I'm saying here, resourced language. The resources for English to be used in any space are too plenty to mention. If I have time, in one of my slides, I'll tell you why. Because sometimes we think that English just happened to be here. No, they are planning. They keep planning. And they pour in resources for English to remain where it is. And if we don't allocate resources for these other 10 languages, we are not going to match English. We need resources to enable the intellectualization of our languages. Unfortunately, the parity of esteem remains elusive. It's elusive because we don't want to really commit to what we have to do. So in terms of government departments, they are trying very hard to commit and fully implement the Use of Official Languages Act of 2012, but we had a commission are failing to comply with the policy, and the report is already out. I think it was published on the 23rd of April, just last month, no, 23rd of May, just last month. However, the academy, the higher education, is seized with the public higher education, the revised language policy framework for higher education institutions of 2020. It took effect on the 1st of January 2021, and the good thing about this policy is there are no escape clauses. You are not going to find where resources permit. No, that one is all gone. This one you have to comply. And the vice rectors, the vice chancellors have to report annually to DHED on the progress of the implementation of this process, of this policy framework. So we have a stronger policy. As practitioners, we are excited that finally we have something that actually compels us to actually develop our languages. And this is what it says. This is one of its aims. It aims to promote and strengthen the use of all official languages across all functional domains of public higher education, including scholarship, teaching and learning, not tutorials, not just tutorials, no. Scholarship, teaching and learning, and wider communication. The memos, they have to be translated. The communiques, your website must be in the languages that you have declared you're going to commit resources to. Because you are the ones who are going to declare. So if you declare 4, that means you think you have the resources to actually advance all the 4 official languages to achieve between them that parity of esteem. But if you don't have resources, you can actually think cleverly. I think Dr. Malet mentioned inter-institutional collaboration. That is vitally important, and the policy actually encourages that, this language policy. But it says scholarship, teaching and learning, and wider communication. So there are not going to be any enclaves in the universities where some of these languages are not going to be there. No. If you have English in the class, Afrikaans deserves to be there too. Without any equivocation. It has to be there. Because you have Afrikaans-speaking communities, and they have the right to access information in their mother tongue. So the policy provides a framework for higher education to develop responsive institutional language policies. So your language policy must, I heard someone say, why, someone in the Senate asking, why are we revising the policy? Well, the text that you should. 1, 2, your policy must align to the national framework. So it can't remain in isolation as a UFS language policy. No, it must be in sync with the national framework. It must speak to the broad aims of the national language policy framework for higher education. And it should enable real transformation. And I put that in asterisk. Real. It mustn't be cosmetic. Otherwise, it's insulting. You can't say, we're going to have all 4 languages. Oh, but yeah, we're going to continue as we did. You are insulting the communities that you declared this language for. Really. So there's no declaration without follow-through. You must actually change. So this should result in improved epistemic access. It is improved in this way. And we experimented this when I was director at language policy at UKZN. You know, we actually targeted what we called killer courses, statistics, and something in business studies that I forgot now. We disrupt the classroom. You teach in English, well and good, but let them discuss in isiZulu. And before we knew it, the lecturers started reporting improved pass rates. That's what we mean by improved epistemic access and student success. I saw in the policy you say epistemic access and success. No, it's student success. It's not just success. It's student, because they are accessing epistemologies in their mother tongue, they improve their understanding. And therefore, the throughput is improved. Students succeed, they do better. So it's not declaration. So you're declaring, you provide resources, and then you follow through. So again, monitoring and evaluation in your policy. There must be an oversight. There must be somebody who says, you introduced 4 languages and you said we're going to see better pass rates. Give us the report. So again, it's not just declaring to assuage communities. Yeah, there is now Afrikaans in our classroom. No, we want to see results. We want to see changes. So, attrition rates, the dean knows, the bane of higher education. Only a third of our students actually go through higher education with degrees successfully. A third. That means out of 100, 66 students fail to complete their degrees. Only 33 do. And we want to stem that tide by actually improving epistemic access and then translating into student success. It's something that is really of national imperative. We're not just doing it so that we stop hearing these pressure groups that are always telling us 1 or 2 things about English or isiZulu or whatever language they are pressuring us. No, it is because we are worried. It's in higher education because we want to stem a problem. And we are the best placed people to experiment with these huge challenges because, again, we are in the business of pursuing knowledge, pursuing the truth, that which actually has translational impact. So we are doing it because it has to be done. And I think, I don't know how I'm doing for time, because I'm not seeing any flashes, but I will continue. The threat, 4IR, I'm told I'm okay. The big threat is the digital infrastructure that comes with the 4th industrial revolution. We need to move fast in actually getting our languages in the cyber infrastructure. Because I'm afraid everything that lives out of that infrastructure is endangered. And there is no better way of putting it. We really need to provide resources for our African languages. And the fact that they are under-resourced or resource scarce or less resourced or low-resourced languages is a serious concern. They are under-resourced because they lack data resources, which preclude their development of computer-based and data-driven technologies. So it's very difficult to develop a spelling checker, for instance, in an African language because you don't have the data to train that technology on. So we really need to move fast, first in developing Corpora for Sesotho, for isiZulu has a corpus, so you don't have to worry about that. See, inter-institutional collaboration, you can already leverage on what UKZN has already done. It has actually, I think, the biggest African language corpus in the world. Then, I don't know now, then I had developed the biggest corpus in the world, African language corpus in the world. That's set here in the African soil at an African university. And with that corpus, by the way, we developed the first working spelling checker of isiZulu. It's available, it's free. So you see, resources, data resources, and technology. Without data resources or these so-called linguistic resources, it is very difficult to develop the technologies that we require to function efficiently in this cyber infrastructure. So I talk a lot about what we mean by resources and resourcefulness in a paper with a colleague of mine at UCT. Because they are resource scarce, it means some of them don't have exhaustive linguistic descriptions. And you begin to see that our former grammarians, the so-called Dokes and Meinhof and others, had limited appreciation of when you start developing a technology, you start seeing the gaps, the knowledge gaps, and you need for those gaps to be plugged in order to come up with, again, an efficient machine learning system. So again, working and developing technologies for isiZulu, we began already to revise the noun class system that you know. We reshaped the noun class system because it had gaps that some of the lexicon, the current lexicon in the language, could not be slotted into that noun class system. So when you start working on these languages, then you begin to see that, oh, there are gaps. We need to fill in these gaps. And therein, you revise even the grammar books, the grammatical descriptions of your languages. So it's part technology development and also linguistic descriptions. And again, you can have these corpora, because once you have a corpus, you can actually query that corpus very quickly, very efficiently, using a software, and it will show you some of these gaps very, very quickly. So in the first instance, you just need a Sesotho corpus. And you can start with Danny Prinsloo at the University of Pretoria. At some point, he had corpora for all the 11 languages in the country. So the development of HLTs and computational resources and expert human resources and funding resources are a prerequisite, particularly funding. You must put your mouth where your mouth is. So if we declare 4, ask the university, where is the money going to come from? Because when I was at UKZN, that was my first question. And how much is it? And then we do the math, and no, this one is not going to take us anywhere. Because the terminology development process alone, when you're developing terminology for physics, for instance, that's about one workshop. $300,000. These are the people that were doing the math when we were organizing these workshops. Just for physics, 300,000. And then mathematics, statistics, anatomy, etc., etc. This is the amount of money that you need. So you just have to tell the university, we need money for this. And I have already primed, by the way, because she said I have already primed DHED that the vice chancellors are going to come for budgets. You just have to find that money, because you can't just declare, because a policy is a declaration, right? You can't just say, now I declare that you must all develop African languages for teaching and learning, for research, and who is going to publish in that Zulu journal? Who's going to do that? So you need to put in processes in place so that we achieve that, because you don't just declare to get us excited, but you declare so that you can achieve that. So the budget is very, very important. The resources are important, and they include experts as well in these areas. So I'll try and speed through the last slides. So I have framed 4IR as literally the biggest challenge, because that is the new infrastructure. The new infrastructure of 4IR is digital, Internet of Things, linking things that are sitting in somewhere where it can be accessible using neural networks. Data sets that are already trained, annotated, and are sitting somewhere in the internet. So African languages must have data sets that are sitting in this cyber infrastructure. Otherwise, 5 minutes. So Chatbots, for instance, they use neural networks to generate intelligent responses. And if you want interaction in a chatbot with a machine, with an application, with a technology in isiZulu, you have to have data sets that are available, that these technologies can access in your language. So because there is paucity of findable and reusable data in African languages, the digital divide is set to increase. That is the biggest challenge. English is going to, right now I'm generating text in English by speaking in English. If I had done this in isiZulu, I would be generating text in isiZulu. But look at us. And the next speaker is going to come and generate text in English, for English. So the more we continue this way, the more we are actually empowering English and disempowering African languages. So while artificial intelligence presents real prospects for future, particularly the future world of work, the work is cut out for African languages, I'm afraid. So in conclusion, the revised language policy framework provides for the re-intellectualization of African languages. The institutional language policies must be bold, and I put it in bold deliberately, in their aims, in their declaration, in their objectives, and the translational impact. The accompanying plans must be clear, unambiguous, and resourced, financed. Well, including experts as well, because they're part of the resources. The challenge that confronts African languages is the paucity of digital language resources, and we need to address that. They are hitherto undocumented languages. Remember, we used to say a language that is not written down is endangered. Well, this time, a language that doesn't have data sets that sit in the dictionary infrastructure is endangered. That is the reality that confronts us, and the time to act is now.
Professor Langa, Khumalo, thank you very much for that enlightening, informative, powerful, transforming. It's also guiding as we are still reviewing our language policy. We are so grateful, sir, for your presentation. Thank you very much. I'm beyond weight on how to actually thank you enough. I'm sure that Professor Van Niekerk, we have a long way ahead ourselves, but thank you for Prof. Khumalo for guiding us. And later on, we have a session with him again to take us through our language policy. We thank you very much, Professor Khumalo. And thank you for bringing up the philosophers like Epouliad to remind us that our African languages were intellectualized many centuries ago, and then civilization and colonization came to de-intellectualize our languages. Hence now we talk about intellectualization instead of re-intellectualization of our languages. Thank you for bringing that one up. And as in your introduction, you talked about what is a language. In our UFS language audit resource last week, with engagement with our students, colleagues from SADiLaR, they asked our student, what is a language? What does your language mean? And some students, they said, for me, language is a tool for the transmission of knowledge. And it's difficult if that tool is the language that is not my language. So they did actually talk about that. Thank you for going over that to reaffirm our students as well, and that we need to transform in terms of the languages that we use for teaching and learning at the University of Free State. And thank you for reaffirming us that all the UFS languages actually need to be, in terms of pairing, you talked about social justice in terms of how we view our languages. There's no primary language. There's no language that is better than the other. So we need to articulate that clearly in our language policy. Thank you very much. I will not talk much, colleagues, because our next speaker is going to respond to Dr. Khumalo and engage with us in terms of discussion, question and answers after such a powerful keynote address. I will bring to the stage Professor Mahome Masokga, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, to respond to Prof. Khumalo's speech. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Which one of your presentation?
No, I don't have. I'm speaking tomorrow. Yes. Good morning, colleagues. Professor Khumalo and colleagues. I'm going to do exactly what you said, that you don't want to leave out some people and say all protocol observed. I think it's actually a good strategy. Thank you, MC or Chairperson, Dr. Ngubane. It is actually quite difficult to respond to such a powerful presentation. I was actually saying to Dr. Malita there that I'm not even sure what to say after this presentation by the gentleman is making it very, very difficult, more difficult now. You know, and I think Dr. Ngubane, and I thought she was going to do my job, and I was saying to Dr. Maleti that she's now responding to the presentation. But thank you very much for that. Let me start by really appreciating even the way you have titled your presentation this morning, and because you have actually brought three variables. One is knowledge, language, and the future, and succinctly so, you know, how you developed this, and to explain to us that language has to be looked at in a broader sense in this regard. I thought I should start by giving two stories. Maybe let me start with my experience as a first-year student in the 90s, late 80s, when I was at the university, the then University of Natal. That's where you started this. I recall very vividly when we were doing our registration. Our dean at the time was Professor Prozeski, and I'm told he's actually residing around Bloemfontein. We were queuing as young boys, and of course the majority were boys, and of course there were girls at the arts building of the University of Natal and Pietermaritzburg. I remember when I actually reached the point where I was supposed to meet with the dean, and he listened to us, and I remember we were 3 or 4, and he then said, these 3 boys should be taken to a 3L class because we could not actually express ourselves in good English. 3L meant we had to attend classes after 5 every day of the week. And 3L meant learning language and logic. It meant that we were not really good to be university students. And at the very same time, we were given a dictionary. It was an English dictionary that I was given by the dean, Professor Prozeski. So on my form, and it's a pity I did not have a camera at that time, it was written, the dean wrote 3L, and then he circled it. And when they were punching, they were doing it more in a very, it was actually paperwork at that time. So that's exactly what Professor Prozeski did. And I just wanted to give you that story before I come into some of the presentations. But the second story is now at the time when I was still at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. I remember one morning I got a call from the principal of a school that your son is very violent, has become very violent, because I had taught him that a dog, which you know in my language is called mpya. So at school now they introduced dog. And he kept on saying, no, that's not dog. My father taught me that this is mpya. And he became very violent because now they were pushing him to accept dog. And as I was listening to you, Professor, you're talking about these de-intellectualized forms of de-intellectualization. And my son was actually going through that process of being de-intellectualized. And I had to leave the office in Midrand to rush to Pretoria to the school because it was becoming very violent to say, I believe what my father taught me. And he was right. And because I told him, what I'm teaching you is correct. The fact that I'm still alive, it means what I'm teaching you is real. And that's exactly how I convinced my son at the time. So he was very, 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 very violent in a sense, but not really fighting, but really standing his ground. He stood his ground to say, that's not a dog, but it's a mpya. But when I went into the meeting with the principal and the teacher, I said, but you could have actually taken my son along to say, explain to us what mpya is in your understanding. And until he understands that there's another word from another language, but you were saying, stop calling this thing mpya, call it a dog. And it's very important, and I thought I should tell these stories before I move into the points that you have raised. But the third story, if you would allow me to tell you, is when I was still doing my master's research work. It was in Limpopo, in a village, and I was very privileged to work with an old lady, a lady with very gracious lady. She was 89 years at the time. So I stayed with her for about 5 months in the village. I stayed with her, sleeping on the floor, learning everything, because I was doing my master's, which had to do with anthropology here and history. But she was a very interesting lady. She was in the village called in a more indigenous way, a midwife. It's a pity, it's accidentally spoke about a midwife, but she was an indigenous midwife. She couldn't utter any English word. She couldn't read or write, but she was very intelligent. And I learned a lot from her, because what she did was she would use strings, very strong strings, and each time she had a case that she was handling, she would tie a string. And the manner in which she would tie it, she will tell you the name, the birth, and the case she was handling, whether the mother was weak or not weak. And she had about 126 strings. And she could tell you, logically so, which was the first, the second. And she did not use the number system that we are using. I've published about this somewhere. Pity that she passed away. But she was powerful. And when you're talking about her knowledge about being a midwife, a respected midwife, and she never had any case of fatality of someone dying out of that. So I thought these stories I should actually tell you share with you colleagues this morning. But I think Professor Khumalo has challenged us. I think the first thing that is going to really become an issue is to challenge the committee which is working on the language policy. Dr. Malete, Prof. Van Niekerk, and others, you have to take a stand. And I always say, you know, in life, you cannot be loved like money. You know, everyone loves money. Prof. Van Niekerk, I think there has to be a position that must be taken. And you have to give the university a challenge. Professor Khumalo has now said to us the university must declare. But it will be a problem if the committee is not in agreement. And I think we are all saying this morning that there is no language which is secondary. Let it be a position of this workshop this morning that Afrikaans, English, Sesotho, and isiZulu, because that's what we are teaching. And I'm not imposing any position this morning. I think you need to go back to the drawing board and agree and say all are having the same level. They're on the same level. But you need to go to your drawing board. I think the problem would be if you don't agree. You have to come to an agreement to say which languages are you going to use. But then it must be the challenge of the university to say, how do we support this? I think the first issue is about putting all 4 languages on equal footing, without question, and then deal with the implications thereof. So that's the first thing that I thought is very important. But then the second issue is that the policy must declare where the university stands. Having dealt with that in your committee, the committee has got to declare. Sorry, the university has got to declare. But without any declaration, if someone doesn't give you declaration, that person can actually do anything because you are not committed. I think we are all saying we need a commitment from the university. Colleagues, I believe in actually putting it as it is. University has got to say what does it mean in dealing with this. But also, Professor Khumalo, and you touched on it partly, I see this project linked to the decolonial project. The university has got to seriously engage in this, because language cannot be language out of no context. There's got to be a particular ontological frame of the university that we are intentionally taking this position as a university. But you can't deal with this issue of the language policy if you don't have a presupposition that you support and push. You have got to have a stand. But the university cannot just say, no, we allow every. You have got to take a stand. You know, when I was actually growing up, we used to have a lecturer would say, you can't, and I'm sorry to our mothers and women, to give an example about pregnancy, because I've never experienced it in my life anyway. He would say, you can't say I'm half pregnant. And I never understood what he meant. It's either you are pregnant or you are not pregnant. So, and I'm sorry for the gender. I am actually a glorified feminist at heart. I might be using this example, and I'm not undermining women in this case, but I think we need to take a stand. Even our decolonial position must be clear, so that it's not ambivalent. There's clarity in terms of where we stand. Because we cannot talk about language transformation, but when it comes to the ontological framing, we are actually going elsewhere. So we have got to be very clear about that. And I think this is also in line with our Vision 130, which is actually about transformation. And I like it because one of the areas of our Vision 130 is about social justice. And I think this brings me to 3 critical justices, if I can use that term. The first one is about giving intellectual justice to our students. We need to do that. And I know Professor Khumalo spoke about re-intellectualization, but I think we need to do that. What does it mean when I do research and teaching? Does this give my students justice? How I assess, the kind of literature I recommend, or and also we need epistemic justice. And I know that I've just given you a big term, but we need to really, really come back and debate this. What does it mean to talk about epistemic justice at the University of the Free State? And of course, because what we do, and I mean, going to some of the writings that I have looked at where we talk about epistemicid's. People talk about every time you move into a class, further and further you are taken away from your community. When I go home, I'm no longer sure if I'm still part of that community. But I think what we teach should actually center our students. It should bring them closer to the communities that we serve out there. More so that our communities have been ravaged on a daily basis, politically, economically, and so on. And the masses of the students that are graduating should still go back to those communities. But our university should be a space we should be used to connect our students to these communities. And language becomes that important, agenda in ensuring. But a university which has got clarity in terms of its ontological framing will be able to do justice to this project. So it is a very serious challenge, colleagues, that we are faced with. Until universities take a point, and I'm saying universities, and it should not be a question of only talking about the University of the Free State, but we have a very, very big responsibility. Where do we stand as a university? Where do these graduates go to? Especially now, Dr. SADiLaR, when we talk about graduatedness, attributes and all those things. How sure are we that these students will still go back and do what we're talking about if we are not addressing this challenge about language, which is a big issue? And I think one thing which has always bothered me is always feeling that making use of English, it takes you down to feel like you are a child of a lesser God. You are a stepchild. And I think this must change so that our students will actually have the confidence and to see themselves to be on par with the rest. And I know we talk about this globalizing, intellectualizing at the global space. We talk about all these big terms about excellence. We use them. When we want to make sure that you don't actually come on the stage with the rest, we bring the tag of excellence and we coach it, and then we push you away. So we need to look at that, colleagues, if we want to do that. And then other issues, and I like it, Prof. Khumalo, that this must not be cosmetic. I also don't believe in cosmetics. We need to be real. And we must confront it and be truthful about it. We can't just actually gloss over this and leave it there and say, what is the problem? And I don't want to tell you, in one committee where I went, the question was asked about how do we deal with issues about women empowerment? And then someone just simply said, no. No, we do give them bursaries, we do this thing, And I said, my goodness, what kind of an answer is that? And I was thinking about language issues, about justice and so on. We gloss over these things, and then we just move on. And Professor Khumalo, I think you have challenged us. But what I like is that I think university management is committed, I can tell you. That university management is committed. And I think it's a question of us now, because the question about language is us now providing clarity. So that I think our roadmap must be clear, so that there are no issues of confusion in dealing with what we're dealing with. And I think it's a very big challenge, Professor Khumalo, if we're going to go back to the university management with going to Senate. I think when you go to the senators, our story must be a clean story. And this I like very much. And so that we can ensure improved epistemic access. I've spoken about justice, but you can't have access before you deal with justice issues and success for our students. I like it. You know, maybe before I close, I recall the time I was still at the University of Venda. It's a very small university there. I was a research professor in the school at that time before they started reconfiguring the university. And they have, in the African languages, they've got Chivenda, they've got Sepedi, or Northern Sotho rather, sorry, Northern Sotho, and they've got isiZulu and isiNdebele and Setsonga. And when we were grappling with issues about postgraduate research, when I arrived there, proposals were written in English. And that was the first thing that I said, you know, this thing does not even need any policy. And that is the position I took as a research professor, because I was actually in charge of postgraduate training in the faculty. I said, right here, right now, I don't want to see any proposal written in English. And now the university has now taken a policy position. If you are doing a master's or a PhD in Chivenda, the proposal is in Chivenda. Clean. And of course, they've got the viva voce. You've got to defend. And the viva voce, if it's in Chivenda, the chairperson will conduct it in Chivenda. If it's in Setsonga, it's in Setsonga. The reports are not written in English. They are written in Chivenda. And we started there. And I can tell you, it is one of the success stories that I've done at the University of Venda. Proposal, assessments, and even now the training in terms of the undergraduate training. You can't teach Sesotho in English. You can't. I've never seen that. And that's why I actually waited. I remember when I went to University of Natal, by the way, when Koopman taught me isiZulu, because I couldn't, he put me under non-mother tongue isiZulu. Professor Koopman. You know, I studied under Professor Koopman, you know. And the late Mr. Hlongwa, who was teaching us literature, and Mr. Njangas, when I did Zulu. So I did Zulu non-mother tongue 1 and 2 and 3. So they started with us gradually, and then we went into Ibanga, and very interesting. But I liked it because my first task was uhambo lwam lwase going to the beach olwandle ngavuka ekuseni. You know, ngabhala lento le ngayibhala ngesizulu, and I started appreciating isiZulu. But they took me, you know, they walked with me. And I think we have to come to that position where we take a position, colleagues. And there are a number of things, and I don't want to waste your time. Professor, you have given us a lot to chew, and I hope that the committee will have the energy to engage. And as I always say, I think the ball is in your court, colleagues, but history will judge you. But be truthful in terms of how you're going to engage with this. There's nothing that beats the truth, even when how you feel about things. And don't be afraid of sharing your misgivings and say it. I think it's important to say it, to say, yes, I'm concerned about Africans, I'm concerned about English. You wrestle in that boardroom until you come to a conclusion. But the problem will become if all of you are not sure about what you want. But we cannot, as I grew up in Pretoria, in the township, we don't want a policy, a majaja. Majaja, something that you can't hold it. It doesn't make sense. A product that you can't go with it. So I'm really challenging you, colleagues. This morning, it's not a showcase, it's not a talk show. It's about life, it's about people's future. It's about the future of this institution. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Masocha, for that powerful response. What you said when you just finished now touched me a lot when you said that our future generation will judge us. They will ask us, what did we do when we were given an opportunity? We are here right now in time, in history. Then we'll be asked by the future generation, what did you do with the opportunity that we were given? So for all of us, this is a challenge, colleagues. The language policy is not for the Faculty of Humanities, it is not for the academy, it is for the entire university. We are all key role players in making sure that our language policy, it rises to the level that Professor Khumalo talked about. It responds to our students' needs. It aligns very well with our language policy framework for higher education. It is very transformative in nature as well. So we do not need to have to be liked. That's what Professor Khumalo said, that we do not need to be liked like the money. We are not the money, but we are here to serve the purpose and the social justice in terms of our language policy. Professor Khumalo, we heard you well. Professor Masocha, we heard you very well. Thank you for that powerful talk that you gave us. Colleagues, now we are moving on to our almost towards the end of our program. We are going to give our colleagues in the room an opportunity to ask a question, to comment, to give their perceptions of our Prof. Khumalo's talk, Prof. Masocha's talk, our languages, the status of our languages at UFS, their concerns as well, so that as we move forward with the review of our language policy, we also take stock of what our colleagues feels like as we are here right now in terms of the review of our language policy. I'll call into the front Mr. Letsela. I don't see you, Letsela, so that maybe we can have a roving mic so that you move easily across our colleagues so that we can get their comments. Prof. Khumalo is here to respond. Prof. Masocha, I'm not putting you on the platform, Prof. Dr. Malet is here as well. The members of the Language Policy Review Committee, Professor Van Niekerk is also here. The Academy is also here as well. So please give us your concerns, give us your comments, appreciate where you feel you need to appreciate, and so on. And I will now start with that session. I see a hand right at the back. Mr. Letsela Mutawung, I see another hand right there. Colleagues, please feel free to ask questions. There are no tough questions and difficult questions to ask. Thank you.
Right, good morning. I'm Professor Johan Rousseau from the Department of Philosophy and Classics. First of all, my sincere gratitude to, well, all three speakers, and especially Prof. Khumalo, that you graced us. It was truthful, it was powerful and brave, and I wholeheartedly support what you said. I just want to add two further comments. I think both our speaker and the respondent pointed out to the necessity of dealing with concrete institutional obstacles to this decolonial language project. Now, I don't know if it's very original, but I once tried to make sense of stuff happening in post-apartheid higher education. And I came around to the view maybe many of the universities are busy with what I call self-colonization of a special type, which is to say that you uncritically still adopt and apply knowledge norms developed elsewhere that is not really relevant for our situation. And I'm not saying don't take from elsewhere, that's not the point. And I'd like to give two examples at the UFS, which I think it would be very valuable for our colleagues on the Language Policy Committee to grapple with. The first one is this obsession with so-called university rankings. Prior to 1994, to my best knowledge, most of our universities did not really try to get a position on those rankings. And since then, there seems to have been a sort of a mass stampede to get ranked there. And the predominant ranking systems, as you probably know, do not even recognize research published in other languages than English. It's absolutely ludicrous and shocking that that has been adopted wholeheartedly. I've been told personally by higher management members at this university I should maybe not think of publishing in Afrikaans or French, in which I've also published, because it's not going to help us in the rankings. My response is to hell with that. I want to create knowledge, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o said, which in our context can liberate us. That's the first point. The second one, we, over the past couple of years, had been swamped with a process of what I would like to call epistemological colonization, when at this university we had to adopt a new so-called ethical clearance framework, which was based in medicine. And I challenged the people in Senate and said, well, why should we take medicine as our framework? What does that have to do with anything, you know? And to give you an example of the absurdity that happened, in my faculty, I think it was colleagues in the Department of Hebrew, Professor Masocha told the beautiful story of the 89-year-old woman with whom he spent 5 months. A colleague in Hebrew, or a student, wanted to investigate IKS relating to Hebrew and the Bible, if I'm not mistaken, in which interviews had to be conducted with people older than 65. Now, 65 is the retirement age because Otto von Bismarck in Germany, when he became the leader, he did research and said, well, when does the average German man die? And they found out 65 years and 3 months. So he said retirement is 65 and then 3 months to get your stuff in order. We still subscribe to that ludicrous thing in South Africa. And my colleagues in Hebrew had to have a battle because they were told by these so-called ethicists that these elders are fragile. You see, you have to consider their fragility. So these are just two examples that I think stuff that at this varsity, a conflict has been brewing a long time, and we need to tackle it head on, and I will be there side by side. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much for that comment. Professor Khumalo, is there anything you want to say in response to our colleague's comment over there?
I think it's such a powerful remarks. I didn't see the professor who was speaking, but it's so profound because what he says when we are doing what we're doing, and I said, I have spoken about language in many forums, many global forums, and when I was in China, this Chinese professor said to me, you speak well, and I actually took the opportunity to go to your website and look at your publications. You also publish in English, but you're talking about language, and African languages in particular. Do you know when you're writing in English, you are contributing to the colonial library? And by the way, they don't even read what you're writing. You are just reduced to a footnote. because they have their own critical thinkers that lead the thinking. So you think you are going to innovate in a second, third, fourth language? Never. You can only innovate in your mother tongue. And that's what we are trying to say here. It's a project. It's a pity that it was disrupted in '94. And I always tell people that each time a university proscribes in Afrikaans, so-called Afrikaans universities, each time they stop using Afrikaans as an official language of that university, I mourn. Because we are poor for a language that is recognized in the constitution of this country, that is spoken as a mother tongue by people in this country. We can't celebrate that. If you do, then you are already simultaneously killing the prospect of any of the 9 languages. If you celebrate that, you're killing the prospects of all these 9 languages. So we save ourselves better to be sober when we are confronting this question. What is our universities doing? Are they European universities in Africa? Or are they truly African universities? And if they are, that means the knowledge that they are producing must be relevant to the communities that these universities subsist. Otherwise, that knowledge is useless. And true to the professor, our rankings don't serve us a thing. We are parroting to the instruments of measurement that are good for Oxford, that are good for Harvard, Stanford. And we will never catch up. But we can set our own rubric. Do you know, if we were to start saying, no, you learn from kindergarten to university in Afrikaans, in English, in Sisulu, you will see the type of knowledge that we produce that changes this country. For us to still be going to, I don't know which country we went, and I think it was the Netherlands, to get a second-rate generator to come and fix our electricity problems, we are laughable. How many times have we produced, since '94, engineering graduates? For us to go to the Netherlands, to go and get a 50-year-old machine, I don't even know what the new minister said, was it 30 years already? That it is going to come and solve our own ESCOM problems. It speaks to innovation. We will never innovate as long as we go through an education system where we manage through rote memorization. There is no originality whatsoever. And I want to thank, I think it's Professor, yes, I thank you, Prof, for your comment.
Thank you very much, Professor Rousseau, for that comment. Professor Khumalo, thank you for the response. So, colleagues, now we will take a round of questions or comment, and Professor Khumalo will jot some comments down, and then he will come to the podium to respond. That's a request from our technical team that Prof. Khumalo, you respond from the stage so that people joining us virtually can also see you while you're responding to the questions. Colleagues, I saw a hand over there. Please ask a question or a comment.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings. Greetings, everyone. My name is Avela Maziko, a student here doing my second year in BCom Finance. As a FISBOSFOL activist, I would like to say I appreciate the talk from Professor Khumalo, particularly on decolonization. But my question is, how far are they in terms of including other schools or other faculties outside of humanities? Like, let's say, if there are technical terms that they use in the School of Health Science, how far are we in terms of like decolonizing those kind of aspects? And also, do they include the basic education in the conversation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. There's another hand.
Thank you, Prof. Khumalo, for such an inspiring presentation. There's really a lot to chew in that particular regard. Mine is between a comment and a question, so to say, Prof. Khumalo, particularly in relation to knowledge production and in line with using African languages as vehicles of this knowledge production. I'm speaking in particular on journal publications and the space for publication in African languages. I will just take you back a bit on a recent research that I've conducted with my colleagues. We did a scoping review of journals in South Africa. We actually scoped various databases to just check which journals in South Africa do allow for publication in African languages, so to say. Interestingly, we got 10 that are published in official languages, so to say, in different disciplines, so to say. And what was interesting is that these journals that publish in African languages, their policies are not in line with like the provisions of the Constitution, so to say. And then my question then says, for example, one journal would tell you that, yes, we publish in African languages, but most of our articles that we publish are in English. So already you are given that to say, okay, you can bring your article, but there's little space to do that. So how do we navigate that space, Professor Khumalo? How is it possible? I don't know who regulates journals because I don't know, but how do we navigate that space? If we want to publish in our African languages, but we don't have that opportunity, where do we publish, so to say? Thank you. If we just publish anywhere, will that be recognized by the university? Because there are rules as well that govern publishing at university. Thank you.
We are going to take the last question and then give Professor Lang an opportunity to respond. I see another question over there.
Good morning, colleagues. I wish I could pose this question in Setswana, but I'll do my best to, for the sake of the colleagues, to put it the way I'm thinking of it. We have a challenge in our country with I think we've seen the report about the grade 4s that are not able to read. And I'm trying to think, like, when they come to university in some years, how will the status be? So I want to thank Prof. Khumalo about this, the challenge he has posed to the university about the policy. And I think our language policy needs to be fast-tracked and be very strong, because as a university, we are like an example in the country. We're sitting with a lot of intellectuals and learned people, and our contribution to the country is very important. So my comment is that it has to be in such a way that it also influences government in that direction. I don't know if there's strong partnerships between university and government so that it can assist in terms of the situation of our schools where we are having problems with language, because I think the children probably struggle to read because they're not reading in their mother tongue. So our influence from the university, where do we stand in that regard in working together with government and the Department of Education to alleviate, or rather to alleviate this challenge. And secondly, I'm at the university library. We have we've launched a university press where we are encouraging students to write in their mother tongue, and we publish those books. So when it comes to, I think with the language policy, when it's strong, it can actually assist this initiative to be very successful. And as we have already started and working together, so it's just my comment in terms of collaboration and working together to make this initiative really work. As Prof said earlier, that it mustn't be a talk, just a talk shop. Thank you.
Thank you for the first round of questions. Prof, I will give the podium to you now.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for the questions and comments. The first one on how far the university has gone to affect the language policy changes across the faculties. I think that's for my colleague there to answer. How far that has gone here at the university, I have no idea. But I think in terms of development, language development, and I'll speak to my experience at UKZN, we didn't have a formula. We started with those modules, those courses that were ready to be part of the language policy changes at the university. So Anatom would put his hand up and say, we want to develop terminology for teaching and learning purposes in anatomy. Can we work with the language division? And we would start the process of developing terminology in isiZulu for anatomy and take it through the whole process of publication. And it's spread like that. By the time I left UKZN, I think we had done in excess of 17 different modules, from anatomy to architecture to physics to mathematics to etc. And all the terms are available in a technical term bank that is available online, that we also developed as part of the architecture of terminology development. So it doesn't have really to have a program. You can start with those that are ready and are willing to go through the process of terminology development through this whole transformation process. Starting from basic education, what is it? What is the link with basic education? It's a very, very genuine concern that this process should actually start with basic education, because by the time students get to universities, they already are familiar with the language that they have been taught through, and that is English. But this project lends itself to universities because, again, we have the affordances. We can experiment, we can create a project, we can monitor the project, we can see, we can even develop and publish the things that are required, the instruments that are required. At basic education, they need for those things to be available, to start out, but they can't start this whole imperative bottom up. I think it lends itself for universities, and there are lots and lots of previous cases. In Tagalog, did the same thing. It started with universities. They started the whole intellectualization process from the university, because the project lended itself very well with universities. But we need to get to basic education and address those needs. What I want to link that basic education comment with is the reading problem. Our kids, in fact, our reading crisis is shocking. 84% of our children in this country can't read and understand. it's a huge, huge crisis. But it is in the way we teach, first of all, the way we train our teachers who go and teach in basic education. I'll give you a very clear example. It's very practical. I moved in 2020 from UKZN to Potchefstroom, where I'm now based. And my children, 2 children were in primary school, one is 10, one is 9. They had a culture shock because they now were supposed to learn a new language, 2 new languages, English and Afrikaans. But we were not worried because they're still young, they can acquire new languages. They are still in that very good, productive language acquisition stage. I noticed something very telling. My kids now can speak and write Afrikaans. They can still read a full paragraph in Setswana. And it is in the teaching and the resources that are made available to support the teaching and learning. In Afrikaans, they even have games, digital games, to take home, to continue learning. In Afrikaans, in Setswana, sorry, there's one textbook. It is kept by the teacher. So when we talk about resources, we really mean it. We need to resource these languages so that teaching and learning can happen. It doesn't happen. Even if there are so many speakers in and around Potchefstroom that speak Setswana, they even have their friends that speak Setswana. But they can't learn it because the teaching is horrible. And again, excuse the choice of the word there. But it's really, really critical. We need to start teaching our African languages differently. It may mean we need to start with the training itself in our education programs. We are training phonics wrong. And some of the languages don't even have the readers and primers. So we just have to get it right. And I've just given you a really, we are 2 years going on 3 in Potchefstroom. They already read and write, and they are examined orally in Afrikaans. But they can't even speak a full sentence in Setswana. I'm not going to go further there. Knowledge production, journals. We at SADiLaR are introducing a Journal of Digital Humanities. It's a process that is iterated by the Department of Higher Education and Training. There is an incubation of, I think, 2 or 3 years, I think, for that journal to be really actively productive. And then there are rubrics, it has to be refereed, blah, 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 blah. Every journal has to go through that. If you're introducing a journal, it has to go through that process. So I think what for African languages, that I think isiZulu is actually going through that, is to just go through the process. You want to introduce a journal, you register with DHEAD, and you just have to satisfy the scientific rigor. I don't think there is a DHEAD, a language that is precluded from publishing a journal in. You just have to go through the scientific rigor, the processes that are required. I know that also other journals like Alternation, like SADiLaR, I think you can have a special issue in a particular language. And again, you have to just keep the editorial scientific process at the level that it is required. What I don't know is if you were to do an experiment, as you did, to check the accessibility, whether these so-called African language articles in those special issues are read by anyone. But we need to cultivate that readership so that the production can go on, because you don't want to write an article and nobody reads it. There's no impact there, or you can't even trace impact there. So again, it's something that we need to generate. And I think it's an excellent initiative, and it started with ULB at UKZN that we want to develop that journal. It has a longer history though, because it started with Pansalp and then it had a still birth, and then we picked it up at UKZN. And I'm hoping that one day we're going to see a journal in African languages. I know that Lexicos does have articles in Afrikaans. And you know, I'm sorry to give that as to me, it's a very easy, ready example. I don't know how some people look at Afrikaans when they're giving examples of how the usage of our 11 official languages. I wanted to actually end, because Kwesi wasn't here. There's a very excellent quotation that I got from Kwesi Kwapra, that, you know, when we are developing our African languages, we want to look too far. What the Norwegians did when they developed Nynorsk to the scientific language that it is today. You know, two very far examples, and there are legends out there. But just next door here, we had Afrikaans that actually developed from just a kitchen variety to a fully scientific language. We have other languages, Bahasa in Indonesia as well, that actually did that within 30 to 50 years. So this is doable, but we need people that are willing to develop science in these languages. And science, not in the type of alien measurements of what it takes for it to be a science, but science because we actually produce knowledge every day. A man is in pursuit of knowledge every single day. I'm going to learn a couple of things, even if it's learning a new name here. That's a learning process. But we make it to be something that is, you know, you see some of the articles that are produced in some of these journals. You're thinking, okay, so it took 18 people to actually write and publish this. But it's science to them. It's something new, truth, something that is there, that needs to be made available to the community. But when you actually try and check the humanities, how many people end up in their career with 50 plus published articles? Just check that as well as part of your research, Dr. Ndebele. It's very interesting. And then you see somebody saying, yeah, I have 250 articles published. Reading, I have made reference to reading. We just need to teach our languages differently and make them interesting in the way we teach them, because we are actually damaging the teaching and learning of African languages. We, the practitioners that actually are supposed to be teaching these languages. And to keep the textbook, resources. I think I have covered the government role. I think the government has given us an excellent framework. Let's make use of it. I have already challenged DHED, not once, twice, in our Vice Chancellor's Colloquium. Those of you who know the Vice Chancellor's Colloquium. We have a last one this year. We have challenged DHED that you can't just give us such a good framework and not provide resources for the framework to be actualized, to be because if that framework has to be, you know, we can really do amazing things as a country, because we can start looking in the face the problems that exist in this country, articulate them well because we're now using the instruments that are very familiar with us, and provide the science of fixing them ourselves. Not to wait for a second-hand machine from the Netherlands. Remember, under COVID, we didn't have to renew our driver's licenses. Remember what the minister says? The machine has to go to Germany to be serviced. So where is innovation in this country? Where is innovation in this country? And yeah. I think I have covered all the. We have, this framework is so good if we read it very slowly. It allows for us to change a lot of things. A lot of things. Not the scholarship that is measured by people who don't care a hoot about us, but the scholarship that is translational, that you can see transforming a community, our networks. A scholarship that is true to us, because it remains abstract if we can't even see the value of, I mean, I'm very happy that the dean is here. Our dean at Northwest University got an email from a student who graduated 6 years ago to say, please, I'm writing to officially hand you back your useless bachelor's degree that I got 6 years ago because it hasn't done anything for me. And he brought it back to the faculty and said, ladies and gentlemen, let us reimagine our curriculum. What are we teaching? What is the graduate attribute that you want for a graduate that comes from the humanities faculty? Is that graduate ready for the world of work? And what work can they generate out there? Don't make them go and look for a tailor-made job. Develop them so that they have the faculty to actually go and generate a job if they can't find one. Then this one wrote very angrily, I hereby give you back your useless certificate that I got here 6 years ago. And that was profound. It speaks to what it is that we are doing when we sit as academics at our universities. And Professor said it so well. You know, we are worried about, and each time, you know, you see the ranking season when it starts and you see the vice chancellors bragging in their LinkedIn statuses. You know, like, really? Do we care that you're number one? We don't even care that you're number one. Number one doing what? South Africa still has ESCOM problems. Pothole problems. I don't even want to talk about potholes. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Professor Khumalo. Colleagues, we are almost up with our program time. If there are any burning questions, I can take one or two questions. Professor Masocha is back. He tried to run away from the questions, but he's back now. If there is a burning question for Professor Masocha, please can I take just one round so that we close our program. We have two questions. Yes, let's allow that one and Dr. Phindile Shangas.
Okay, good morning or good day, colleagues. My name is Phindile. My take on the language policy, I have another perspective on it based on co-teaching and co-research. And I have an idea that through co-research, you know, we are from different backgrounds. And the value is in that we can bring in frames of reference when you teach our own students from the different backgrounds. For instance, at UFS, we have those who speak isiZulu, who are lecturers, or isiXhosa, and who can speak isiSotho, and those that speak Afrikaans and English. So if you are co-teaching a module, it makes it possible that you bring in those frames of reference that will enable students to acquire knowledge in a very clear way, and they feel the sense of belonging. And also in renewing our curriculum, I think it's very important to check on the resources that we use. And I'm glad that Prof. Langa has touched on the digital resources. We do have the infrastructure at the university, and I hope that they can be used accordingly. And within the language, maybe not within the language policy, but even within the way that we work as faculties, maybe the allowance of co-teaching. Let me make an example from my own experience that, for instance, teaching research methods to students, even if it's within health sciences where I am based, one can bring in a professor from humanities who can explain very clearly to the students using their own frames of reference regarding research methodologies. Because I have checked that, students take time to understand, all those theories and the frameworks brought in from the West. And we can also do our own, when we do our own studies, just to bring out that kind of knowledge that will help our students. Working on the grounded theory, for instance, those are the theories that we can use as well. And then coming to the issue of evaluation, monitoring and evaluating as we teach, so that we do not leave other students behind. Maybe that could be also infused within the issues of language. When we monitor our teaching, are we also touching on those students whom the teaching language is the second or third? How are they acquiring what is being taught prior to summative assessment, for instance? And then for evaluation, is there any allowance for language within the questions that we ask students when they evaluate our teaching? And how are all that data, how is it integrated when we work on a curriculum and our teaching methodologies going forward? I'm also within the area of learning analytics. The learning of students also bring out data that would be helpful to innovate in our teaching and bring in the issues around language as well. I mean, it has been elaborated on how important that is. And let me give my also experience when examining theses and dissertations, that is masters and PhDs. At times you can tell that, if the student was writing this thesis in their own language, they could bring out more from the data that they have collected. But when writing up the discussion, the findings, the discussions, the recommendations, there will be something missing because they're trying to think in their own language and writing up in English, which is what is required by the institution. Within the language policy, can we not allow our students, others collect data in their own language from participants in the communities? Can they not write their thesis or dissertation in their own language? And then the university could have resources to interpret that into English. But having been written in the African language, that is before examination, not only when a publication is needed, but when the student is actually writing up the thesis, so that we are able to generate the African perspective of the knowledge and the solutions out there, that could be quite helpful. But co-teaching and co-research also plays a very important role as we amalgamate and learn together and teach together for the sake of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shanga. Can we take one last question, colleagues, before we close? Oh, there's another hand. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I would like to thank Prof. Langa for the very insightful presentation. And I think his talk actually brings me back to what we have been trying to do in our department. We are in the Department of Linguistics and Language Practice, and we train language practitioners. It is one of the most challenging things to do, to try and train a language practitioner without allowing them to use their language. So what we do, we have been in contravention of the policy, which we cannot follow the primary language when we train translators, interpreters, language editors. It is not possible. So we have been using the languages that the students understand, and we have also been trying to get them involved as we train them. We say, as we have various languages, we need those who speak the same language help us understand what the other is saying. So for instance, if I have two isiZulu speaking students in my class, then one would speak in isiZulu, make their comment, ask their question in isiZulu. The other one who understands isiZulu is also then involved in such a way that they will be our interpreter to assist the people who are not understanding the language isiZulu. But Yeah, that is the first comment that I want to make, and actually thank really Prof. Langa for bringing that up, because we have been trying. I think in my written submission, Dr. Ngubani, if you'll remember, I did question the issue of the use of English as the primary language. And then, or that's for the language policy. And then the other thing that I also want to quickly comment on is the partnerships. That is also one of the comments that we made in our response regarding the draft policy, that we should actually try, and I want to bring it now in form of a question to Prof. Langa and the colleagues, that is it not possible that we can, as the institution has already established a partnership with the UKZN, which I have been using a lot because I also teach language policy in our department. So are there no opportunities to create other such partnerships where we can involve roads, where we can involve other institutions that have been sort of granted the authority to develop the other indigenous languages? Is there no possibility at all to bring in the Northwest, to bring in the institution that is that has to develop isiXhosa? Because isiXhosa is one of the main languages of the Free State, and especially coming to the center now. And it's one of the questions that I keep on getting from my students in class as to why are we talking about isiZulu and not isiXhosa? Why are we not involving Setswana in some way? Because it is also one of the official languages of the Free State. So I'm just asking for the colleagues and advice from Prof. Langa, is there no possibilities of us bringing or making this project a national project where we say, this is not an individual project, where we say, this institution developed that, but we come together as institutions of higher learning to say, but let us take this multilingualism project together and help each other to enrich our languages, to also, that they also reach the level where English is. That will be in many years, but let us at least try and say, let us use this opportunity that is before us to enrich the languages that we have. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, thank you. You know, part of my difficulty sometimes is that we may be able to comply with all the set framework. Sometimes there's no reasonable implementation and no monitoring mechanisms. I'm saying this because, you know, in 2015, when UFS adopted the current language policy that is in use, I think most of us said this is a progressive step, you know, but, you know, if one is to look and analyze what has happened over the past years, one is able to pick up that when it came to monitoring, I think we failed a lot. You know, one thing that students could not bring up was what was happening in classrooms because they are afraid of being victimized. You know, where, you know, even in class, it's a primary English class, but there's also Afrikaans, and it's you know, and things are explained only in Afrikaans and making it difficult for other students. I think that has been coming out in student engagement over the past 2 years. So I think one of the things, I haven't seen the draft, but I think if we could tighten up our monitoring mechanisms, I think we could be doing very well. The second aspect is that, I mean, we could do, another aspect is around, you know, what came out on that policy is promoting multilingualism in social spaces. You know, it remains just words. You know, if, we don't have a dedicated personnel, we don't have another system of saying, is this really happening? You know, so I know one thing in South Africa, what's difficult is that everyone will be able to say, I can prove, I comply with the Constitution and all the legislation, but we always struggle with the aspect of implementation and monitoring. I just want to just flag that and hope that this policy will be able to analyze what has happened from 2015 up until now, and what are the areas we may need to improve on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that last question. Colleagues, because of time, I'm going to give Professor Langa an opportunity to respond to the questions and the concerns.
Thank you very much again, colleagues, for the comments. I'll start with the last one. The language policy is a statement of intention. It declares the position of the university. But what you should insist on, and this we took up very early when we developed the UKZN language policy, is the implementation framework. And that must be approved by the university together, so that what you have declared has a framework for its implementation that has all the mechanisms, including oversight. Who is monitoring, who is evaluating, when are they reporting, when does she report to the DVC, when does the DVC report to Senate, when does the Senate submit a report to Council. That must be very, very clear, including who is responsible for what at what level. That's what an implementation plan is. It translates the statement of faith, the statement of intention, the statement of declaration by the policy into something that is actionable, that is monitored, that is very clear with its timelines. I think that is vitally, vitally important. In terms of seeing to the multiplicity of languages playing up at the university. The policy, by the way, it can't tighten. The policy can't say everything that needs to be said. It is also flexible enough, or must be agile enough, to allow for interpretation that allows for creativity by those that are supposed to follow through. For instance, the directorate must have the agility to introduce multilingualism, because it is really stated that while these can be official languages, because you are declaring them maybe because of democratics and because of the resources that you have. You can't declare that which you can't afford to follow up. But you can actually say the official languages of the university are 3, are 2, are 4, depending on your resources, but you promote multilingualism in all these spaces. That phrase alone allows for the directorate to include activities that may bring in languages that are not necessarily declared as official languages, but are languages that your demographics show are important, are critical for social cohesion and belonging. Because remember, those principles must be lived. So at UKZN, while we had for many years a bilingual language policy that said English and isiZulu, we subscribed to multilingualism, and it was very clear in the policy. It allowed for the language directorate to have a program that we used to call Buolena, because we knew that our demographics, because we had between 75 and 80% mother tongue isiZulu speaking at our university. But we also knew that there were Sesotho speaking and other languages. So we picked up on the language that was third or fourth in the demographics and kept it alive. Because we knew that in all intents and purposes, it is there, but you're not going to see them emerge in a corner or in a particular activity as the speakers of that particular language. But we had the agility in the interpretation of the policy to actually introduce that language program. I think now it has actually graduated the language to the official status at the university, because we kept that community alive. We had so many activities throughout the year and throughout the years that allowed for Sesotho to be cultivated and be spoken in our campuses. That affirms the language, and it affirms the students that are in your campuses. So those are the two comments that I had from the last speaker. I've forgotten what you said. By way of question, you said the last part of it. Yeah, translanguaging. Translanguaging is a strategy. And I thought she was actually giving us that as part of the instrumental contribution. But I mean, the gentleman, sorry, you mentioned something on the policy. I'm so sorry, I thought I had it, but I started getting carried away when I was responding to the last speaker. Yes, please, very quickly.
So, Prof, I was saying in terms of the language policy, that in our department it is not possible to train language practitioners with the primary language. So what we actually have been doing, we have been using the languages in class, although the policy says that the languages of class is primarily English. So my last, what I wanted to put in a question is that, is it not possible for us to have a national project regarding multilingualism?
Yes.
Yes, Prof, thank you.
Okay, thank you, I remember now. Yeah, you spoke about, this policy actually encourages inter-university collaboration. You can actually collaborate with SADiLaR because that's where I am, and we have resources for all the official languages, by the way. So you can come and pick and choose what it is that you want, including spelling checkers. Okay, so you can also come to SADiLaR. But we have said the universities must look at which university has more strength. You have isiZulu as your official language here, but you don't have to pour in resources. We have already problematized the issue of resources. You don't have to continue pouring in resources for isiZulu because UKZN is already doing that. So just have an MOU going with UKZN and access all the resources for isiZulu at UFS. You don't have to replicate what they're already doing. You're already wasting the little resources that we have for the development of these languages. So such collaboration is very, very helpful because then you're leveraging on your strengths. Okay, so you don't have to develop a corpus of isiZulu. They already have the biggest corpus in the continent. You don't have to develop a spelling checker for isiZulu. You don't have to develop all the terminology. It's expensive for that. All the terminology that have been developed for isiZulu. You just go to the link, the term bank, and it's available. You just link your students to that resource. So I think what we need to do is to plan smartly. And again, the language directorate can lead. What we used to have at UKZN is to have an annual language program. So what is it that we're doing this year? What is the language program? What are the key KPIs? How are we actually reporting on this? How are we monitoring the reporting on this? We need to actually think that way. And again, it must be very clearly articulated in the implementation plan. The implementation plan must say everything that needs to be done. Otherwise, it can't be left to conjuncture or to student protesting. You don't want for students to protest in order to force a point. That is in the policy that you yourself articulated. Okay, that's shooting yourself on the foot. So you don't need to do that. Let the policy be clear, but let it have the agility for the interpretation of the directorate so that they can introduce programs that satisfy the demographics, the language demographics in the university. But make it clear what the language program is and what it is addressing in the language policy. So that so much, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Professor Langa. Colleagues, thank you very much for your questions, for your suggestions, your perspectives, your perceptions. This is the beginning of our continuous discussion, Professor Masocha. We are going to go, moving forward, we are going to have a number of platforms like this just to get colleagues and our students talking about our language policy and their expectations of the language policy. Professor Langa, there's a number of concerns that raised from the floor in terms of interinstitutional collaborations and the extent to which, as the UFS, we have done to develop our indigenous languages as languages of teaching and learning. Yes, we have an MOU with UKZN. We signed an MOU late last year. We have received a large number of Corpus across different disciplines, terminologies for various disciplines. We are now starting to match that with Sesotho, development of Sesotho. And through our UFS language audits last week, we had colleagues from SADiLaR to establish what we have done as the UFS, what we need as the UFS moving forward in terms of the development of Sesotho as one of our languages in the language policy. So the purpose of that was for us not to reinvent the wheel. For example, we have a number of disciplines that have come forward to say we need multilingual terminologies for these disciplines, but we cannot just jump in and start to develop those terminologies. What if VETS have already done that? What if UJ have already done that? So having colleagues from SADiLaR last week was for them now to compile what other institutions have done, so that moving forward we just approach those institutions so that we can share those multilingual resources for our UFS students. So we are in those processes now, but whatever that still needs to be done, we are going to start from there and moving forward. I think that I'm responding to one of our students. I know that these multilingual resources are an urgent need for our students so that they can start to access these knowledges in the discipline and assist them in understanding those difficult terminologies in their learning. We are really working hard, Professor Khumalo and our students over there, I can still see looking at me. We are working very hard, and we are going to use platforms like SADiLaR to access what has already been done. So we are going to get those links. We do have through Mr. Teletane, I can see here we have multilingual dictionaries as well that have been developed through many years. Mr. Teletane, we have a challenge to actually give those multilingual dictionaries to the academy so that we can see how we can populate them in our platform so that our students can have access to those as well. I'm really grateful that Professor Masocha is here today because Prof. Khumalo touched on the issue of resources. We are now in the process of doing a terminology development for accounting. When I saw the budget early this week, it said 300,000 just for one discipline. And I was like, okay, if we have 10 disciplines now, it means that, wow, it's going to be too much. But I'm grateful that our leaders here in the Faculty of Humanities, so when we submit those that budgets to the Senate, to other structures, they don't say, hey, what are you going to do with all this money? This is too much for the UFS. But yeah, today we understand that we really need to invest resources in the development of our African languages. To all of you colleagues that are joining us online, thank you very much for staying up this far. We are really grateful for your support and for attending. To all the colleagues here in the Albert Wessel auditorium, we are really grateful for your comments, for your for listening, and for responding to the call. I'm now going to call upon Dr. Tholani Hlongwa, the Deputy Director of the Academy for Multilingualism. But before I do that, so that I do not come back after her, colleagues, we do have lunch after this. We have, for the language committee, writing committee, we have a meeting with Professor Langa immediately after this. I thank you, colleagues, for being patient with me. Thank you so much. Professor Dr. Hlongwa, please come and give us a vote of thanks. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Good day, colleagues. My name is Tholani Hlongwa. My duty today is to just give a vote of thanks. But because I'm a storyteller, I'm a linguist, I just want to tell a brief story in relation to what has been shared today. I was once a lecturer at a certain institution in the School of Education, and I went to a school to do or to conduct a teaching practice in one of the schools, and there was 8th graders. And the lesson was in isiZulu, and the teacher was teaching a lesson on imitation, which is ukulingisa in isiZulu. And as I was sitting there, had all my forms to assess the student teacher. The teacher started introducing the lesson to the 8th graders. And she introduced her lesson by saying, I would like you to divide yourselves into groups of 10. And you're gonna choose a leader. And the leader will come forward. The leader will start to imitate the celebrity of your choice in isiZulu. And students did that, and as we all know, students do cheat, or learners do cheat. It seems to me like they had practiced that. And they started doing that as if it was something that was known. And then one group came forward, and they started imitating the Zion Church. And within that imitation, the learner was imitating his father as a pastor. And his father is the known celebrity to him. And they started doing the church in class. And the student's teacher quickly stopped the group, saying, I did not say that. I said, you have to imitate a common celebrity in isiZulu. And then the war started in class. I had to rush out, pulling the student teacher out, defending her, because now I could see the learners wanted to beat the teacher, complaining that she was imposing to them that they are imitating the celebrity that is known to the teacher in another language. But according to the learners, the celebrity is the Zion pastor, who is the father of one of the learners, who is also known in the community. So the audience will interpret that. So I just felt that I need to share this story. And another one, Professor Khumalo himself took us to Rwanda somewhere a few years ago. I won't share where we were going, but then in that country, Professor Langa did not tell us or did not prepare us that in that country where he took us, they did not speak English. They did not speak any African language that we knew. And they were speaking French and I think Swahili. And then one night they took us to a market and we had to withdraw money. In case you always see me with Professor Langa making the signs. And we were looking for the ATM. We couldn't say it in French. We couldn't say it in Swahili. We couldn't say it in that country's language. We find ourselves developing our sign in order for us to be understood by the community that we were looking for the ATM. And we started doing the sign like this. Let me do it. ATM, and that's the sign we made, and we did find the ATM. So that's the beauty of multilingualism. And from there, I came back appreciating the sign language, and that you don't need to get into class to learn a language, but you learn it because of the need. So my duty today, I was given to give a vote of thanks. First of all, I don't represent the academy here, but I represent the UFS language community. So on behalf of the UFS language community, I would like, first of all, I will go by the program to thank our program director, Dr. Nomalungelo Ngubane, the director of the Academy for Multilingualism, for directing this event so well. Siyabonga mama. And then I will also go to Ntate Malete, Ria leboha Ntate, for giving us that purpose and background. And then I will go on to thank Ume Fanikerk, Bayadanki Meyefro. And then to our keynote speaker, Ubaba Langa Khumalo Mbulazi Mtungwa. I think in isiZulu I'm done. Yes, Mbulazi Mtungwa. Siyabonga kakhulu for rehumanizing us, because we thought we were humans. We didn't know. We have dehumanized ourselves. And I don't want to dilute your speech, Ndate. I felt so emotional as you were speaking, because we ourselves have destroyed our languages. We have destroyed the platforms. We don't appreciate what has been given to us, what is at our disposal. Everything is at our disposal, but we refuse to use it. I heard someone speaking about what is happening in the basic education. As somebody who comes from School of Education where I was teaching an African language, I've seen that. We refuse, even when you train the student teachers in African languages, even the manner in which the timetables in the schools is designed, you find that the lecturers of African languages, from my experience, they are given the 8 o'clock lecture before even the school buses arrive from residence hall. So that means it's okay to teach in an empty lecture hall. Or you are given a late afternoon class or lecture time slot, so that you go to class when students are rushing to get the bus to go to rest. Every year for my past 8 years, I experienced that. So we ourselves, the leadership, and it made me so mad. Thank you, Professor Langa. And I would also like to thank Ntate Masocha, Ria leboha haholo Ntate, for responding to our keynote. And again, I'm not here to dilute your response. It was well put. We appreciate it. And I also like to thank our audience that is present here with us, and those ones who are joining online. And I would also like to thank our organizing team. I believe it's the language policy writing task team that organized the event. We appreciate that. We thank you so much. And I'd like to thank the academy team as well for putting everything together. And last but not least, I would like to appreciate our technical team. In isiZulu, we have a greeting to say, Sanibona, which literally translates, we do recognize you, we see you. It doesn't translate to hello. It's not our hello. Siyanibona, we see you, we appreciate you. Thank you so much.